In October 2024, we gathered at the PASI Legislative Summit to tackle a profound and troubling question. Why do our judicial systems seemingly disregard the Constitution, leading to the fracturing of families? The issue of parental alienation has evolved into a silent epidemic, often manipulating as a powerful weapon during divorce disputes. This manipulation not only harms the relationships between parents and their children, but also inflicts emotional and psychological turmoil on the children themselves. As policymakers engage in lengthy discussions about shared parenting arrangements, child support formulas, and custody regulations, the true victims, our children, are often left on the sidelines. They face the emotional fallout of these contentious debates while their lives are dissected as if they were mere bargaining chips in legal negotiations. It is imperative that we come together as a community to advocate for the meaningful change in our family courts. We must unite to ensure that the voices of children are prioritized, fostering environments where they can thrive rather than endure the negative ramifications of adult conflicts. Their well-being should always take precedence, driving us to demand legal reforms that uphold their rights, dignity, and emotional health. Only by standing together can we hope to create a future where children are shielded from unnecessary strife and their best interests at the forefront of every decision made.
It is my pleasure to introduce Tina Mayer. She serves as an advisor to the Parental Alienation Consortium. She is the initials are licensed mental health counselor who serves as a guardian ad litem, a PC, a mediator, and is the owner of the Resolution Center of Jacksonville, Florida. Tina obtained her degree with a double major in philosophy and religion with an emphasis in ethics, and then later obtained her master's in mental health counseling. Her passion for problem solving and reconciliation of relationships and helping children is the driver that pushes her forward even when all hope seems lost. There is no labyrinth that doesn't have a solution or way through, even if sometimes requires a chainsaw. And she does this professionally. She's not an alienated parent. She understands because she wants to help. Tina.
Thank you. That's so much. I thank you so much for having me today. And I tend to get a little passionate on this little soapbox as you all do. So Joan, you're gonna have to definitely keep me straight on time management because I want
me to go like this. I'm not doing this, I'm going like this.
and I may need help on how to do these slides. So okay, I'm gonna click on this. I'm hoping I'm going the right way. So we're here to for this weekend to try to come up with solution-focused legislation, because a lot of times what we end up doing is we piecemeal things together and we have different groups and they're all segmented and they're not cohesive, and we really aren't going to get very far very fast if we stay segmented. We need to be cohesive. So I'm hoping that this presentation, which is really a conglomeration of different presentations that I have done for mental health counselors, for judges and attorneys, for alienated parents. So you're kind of going to get a little bit of a gamut, but it covers a lot of bases in a lot of ways. And Joni, I hope I'm hitting the right button. Please, Jesus, here, let's go. No.
We're seeing you, not the screen, because you unshared.
I didn't mean to unshare. I need help. So some of the things that we're working on, and I know that other people are working on around the country. I live in Florida, and I've got some great support and friends down there who are doing this type of work. But these seem to be the things that cohesively will do the most benefit for the bang for your buck. So we have laws, as been mentioned before, on the books already about the presumption of parental kidnapping and custodial interference laws. They need to be understood and enforced. That's huge. And so I don't know about the rest of the states, but I know in Florida that we are working on teaching law enforcement or getting programs together for law enforcement so they understand those codes and those issues that already exist and how to enforce them. The presumption of equal shared parenting, that one is huge because that is a kicking off point. We're trying to stop this from the beginning and not playing catch up with me at the end, because By the time cases get to me, we are knee deep, neck deep, and everybody's in trouble and hurting. The 3 strikes programs, education for and support for the whole family, not just parents. That means education programs for kids when they enter the divorce court. That should be vital, and that should be up front. If any kid going through divorce court had a class that they could go to, a group, because they all feel alone, they all think they're the only ones, and they have no idea that other people are going through the same things that they're going through. And, well, I'm going to get to that in a minute, and these are great stop points and catching points for those cases that might turn into alienating or more malignant type cases. And of course, the accountability for the judges and others who have to uphold the law, they need a lot more training and a lot more ways that we can file complaints, or at least maybe a suggestion box. I don't care what gets us through to it, but something has to be done where we have an access route when things are going south and nobody's seeing what's going south. All right, everybody cross your fingers. I'm hitting a button. Okay, look at that. All right. Required training and competency evaluations for legal and mental health professionals is going to be vital, and I'm going to tell you why. I went through a 2-year really great program for my mental health counseling. While I was doing that, I was serving as a volunteer guardian ad litem with a case of severe parental alienation. I had no language for it. I didn't understand it. I didn't know what I was seeing. All I knew what I was seeing was crazy. And I would be literally in tears in my class with professors sitting there explaining what I was seeing and going, I don't know what to do about this. I don't know how to address this. And nobody said a thing. Nobody said anything about parental alienation. I didn't get any training on it. So when judges and other advocates say, oh, well, just go find a counselor. No, please don't. Please don't do that. Pardon? That was in 2017. Okay. So they don't cover this. And so when you go to a counselor thinking you're going to get help for this, you may or may not, depending on what they know. Because if they don't know this, they can't treat this. Because this is counterintuitive and it goes against everything we're trained to validate. You come in crying, you're saying, I feel abused, I'm this, I feel that. We're supposed to go, oh my gosh, that must be awful. Well, that's not what we need to be doing. So in cases where it's custody, or if there's any kind of family court thing, that's why I said I'm not a good counselor, because I'm confrontational about it. I'm like, can you explain that to me? Help me understand what you're saying. Can you validate that? I don't validate them. I need them to validate me. So my understanding of it, but that's not in all therapeutic cases, but you have to be able to kind of pick and choose what those is. But if you're not trained in it, and you just pick up a family court case or a case that's coming through family court, you can do more damage than you will do good, because you are doing the wrong things in that particular thing. Please eliminate gender bias. Everyone is capable of harming other people. Everyone can have personality disorders. Anyone can lie, cheat, steal, or manipulate. So we cannot go into something thinking that somebody of one gender is more apt to those things. Yes, there are generalities that are true. We have those. But you can't, in this field, you cannot go into it with that. You have to go in clean slate. And sometimes I will even look at stuff and I'll try to put the facts on a sheet of paper without identifiers at all. Like this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. And once you start putting those things in without knowing who's doing the damage, you can come out with a lot more clear assessment for it. So these slides that I'm going to show you right now is when I explain alienation or alienating behaviors to people. And this was specifically made for the judiciary and attorneys. So in an intact functional family, this is what you're going to be seeing: healthy relationships. There's going to be good child development. Generally, we all are a bunch of screw ups. None of us perfect. So but a healthy relationship will have something where the child's platform is stable. That's kind of the key word in that, is that there's stability and some cohesiveness in the relationships. In an intact dysfunctional family, you're going to see a lot of other things going on. You're going to have love. It's often transactional. You're going to see a lot more abuses of all kinds, the ACEs scores will be high. Does anybody know what an ACEs test is? You all know it. So for those of you who do not know, ACEs is a test that you can do for childhood. I just lost what the adverse childhood. See, look at, there we go. So when you look through these ACEs tests, it checks for things like how much violence people have been exposed to, what their parental relationships were like. And so the more ACEs, the higher your ACEs score, the more likely you are to have dysfunction going forward, more depression, more suicidality, more prone to loss of things and not moving forward in a productive way. There's a higher likelihood to have agencies or police involved in an intact dysfunctional family, meaning that there probably is violence. There probably are things that are going on in that home. The emotional immaturity of the parents is the one that I tend to focus on the most, is like, how were they as parents? What was going on in that intact family before separation? Okay, so this would be something that you would consider having a pathology within that family functioning. So when we're going to leave the healthy families alone for just a minute, because they can usually go through this process without too much havoc, but we're going to talk about what you guys are experiencing. So separating with pathologies. So you're going to see the psychological background of this. Clint, can I ask you for some help? Is there any way you can get rid of this? It's blocking. Just this blocking thing here, because I can't read any of that. So the enmeshment, the attachment wounds, and the transference of victimhood to the child. So what you're looking at on these screens, oops, go this one. Thank you. If you can't, you can't. It's okay. I'll figure it out.
Joni, come here. This might be your thing.
So the alignment to one parent starts here, and it usually happens in the marriage. So when we were looking at this dysfunctional families, you get triangulation. Has anybody ever heard that word, triangulation? That should be a very big word on your vocabulary, because what happens when you have three people? If somebody gets in a fight, usually that third person gets drawn in as an ally, right? So that's a basic explanation of triangulation. When you separate with pathology and one of the parents is operating that, or both parents, as we'll see later on, when there's pathology, you'll start seeing these behaviors escalate because people are in a heightened emotional state. So the alignment for the children begins here. So when they start to align and they're feeling confused, they're feeling anxious, and if one parent says to the child, well, you're feeling anxious because your dad is doing this or your mom is doing that. And they start kind of taking that in, and they're like, well, I do feel anxious, or I do feel better when my two parents are fighting, and then we kind of go into one room and only with this one parent, I feel better. Because children, and I know that you guys can't see what I'm doing or maybe on screen, but when they're in a tug of war and they're the rope and both parents are pulling, that hurts. That hurts a lot. You're being disjointed. You're in pain. You're watching two people tear each other apart, and they're tearing you apart. The best way, fastest way to end that pain is to let go on one side or the other. And they're typically going to go with the one that's going to be the highest risk of loss, because what is the child trying to do? I'm trying to hold on to both of you. So now I'm looking at, who can I let go of? Now where I'm being fed things, I'm believing things. So then I'm looking at going, okay, so which one of these two people is going to love me if I let go of them? They're going to choose the safer parent and go, typically, now this is, please understand, I'm speaking generalities. This is not always the case, but they're going to let go of the one who is going to love them regardless. Because if love is transactional, remember in one of the slides, it said that love was transactional. I need to hold on to both of you. The only way I can hold on to both of you is to let go of the one that's safe to let go of and hold on to the one that will leave me if I reject them. So that's how that transgresses and comes in. So if you look at the bottoms of all these slides that look like this, the bottom part is what the children are going through. That's what they're experiencing. And we spend a lot of time in legislation, family court, and other things, focusing on parents' rights and what parents are doing and how the court doesn't see the children, the attorneys don't see that, well, they're not supposed to see the children, but often they do. The only people who are experiencing this are the people kind of down south who are the ones who have to work with them. You know, south end of the totem pole, I mean, like we're kind of low on the totem pole. And so we're the ones watching them go through this and trying to go, hey guys, hold up, you need to stop this because this is where this is going. But that doesn't often happen because we're not brought in time. Did it? Okay, gosh. All right. I'm scared.
Don't worry, you can't do anything.
Okay, I did it. All right. I get bonus points today. So I know we've heard a little bit about this, you know, the separating and once you get the kids isolated. So this is how this begins. Once you undermine the other parent's authority, you remove their power, and then the isolation. So you remove them from anyone who is going to be positively regarding them in any way, shape, or form. And you start controlling the narrative. You start making accusations of abuse. You try to get attention and sympathy. And both parents at this juncture are seeking court intervention to stop whatever is going on. But they are at opposite ends of what they're trying to stop, right? This is where you start doing things like filing petitions for injunctions. So this is in my county or my jurisdiction in Florida, this is the petition for injunction paperwork you have to fill out, okay? There is a section on here about temporary exclusive use and possession of the home, temporary exclusion use of the child, so for no time sharing. Now, what Robert Garza was talking about is perfect. The problem with these is that in Florida, I don't know where it is everywhere else, but you're supposed to have a hearing within 14 days. I think that's too long. I think it should be within 48 hours, but I understand that there are some, you know, backing up of the rest of it. But this tool right here is not used enough. There could be questions added to this that would then move this kind of injunction case into a different category. You've been married 14 years and you've never had even so much as a police call out, nothing, and now you're filing for an injunction for protection. It's not to say we're not going to do this or listen to it, but can we move that into a category where we're looking a little more closely at those cases? This is a missed opportunity for evaluation that doesn't cost any extra. Just add some extra questions to it. And if those questions are answered in a certain way, then we move it over and to go, hey, we might need to look at this one a little more close. This one has possibilities to be problematic. So how many of you recognize this? Yeah. Yeah, but sometimes we don't have name, and when they're going through it, they don't have names for it. So when you're first starting this, nobody's explaining this stuff to you. By the time they get to me, they have already usually learned most of it. But a lot of times I'll show these slides to parents who are coming into my office. They've been knee deep in the court system for a while, and they're looking at me, that's exactly what happened to me. But they didn't have words and they couldn't see the dynamic that was going on. And you'll also notice that I have not yet said anywhere in here parental alienation. So, okay, so as I was mentioning that these are opportunities and stop points, right? They're missed opportunities. The other missed opportunity that I think, and I can't speak to other states, but in Florida, there's a required 4-hour class for every parent going through a divorce. Well, yay. I'm glad that we have it. I've taken it. It's like traffic court classes when you want to get points off your license. You show up, you check a box, and you're done. This is another missed opportunity because I'm going to tell you that I sat in that class, by the way, with my ex-husband next to me, and we were kind of laughing at everything that was going on in the room. But I even then could pick out, that's a problematic case. Ooh, that person's really angry. So they give us a test at the end. We have to answer, but they told us all the answers. So why not regroup that test and make it something else that can be more evaluative? So if people are answering like, how much time sharing should your spouse have with the child? What are your views? And ask those questions so that we get those and we go, oh, Their answers are really, really angry. We probably need to set these people into a different category too. Okay, so by the time you get to this is where I tend to see people when we're kind of already really, really into it. So if you'll notice the child down here at the bottom, that the child holds the authority to reject. Authority is a very big word especially in my space, because when the child holds the authority to reject, the tail is now wagging the dog. And yes, we listen to them? Should we have not? But if we had a class with them and we had groups with them up front, we would be able to pick out those cases where the children are heading down this road a little more easily. So those are stop points in the front. By the time they get to here, they've got some entitlement issues. They don't feel, I don't have to, I don't need to talk to you. I'm here only because somebody's making me come here. And you get all kinds of attitude up and down on that couch. So it's really hard. It makes it a lot harder to break through. And then you get to where I think most of the parents in this room and on these slides are, the ties are broken and there's parental rejection. So the rejected parent, by the way, often comes off as nuts, like you're angry and bitter and resentful. And why should we listen? And you probably are being abusive. And I'm going to be honest with you guys. I have a hard time sometimes with the target parents than I do other parents, because I'm new. I just walked in and all I see are darts flying everywhere and mud slinging everywhere and everybody's screaming, crying, and I'm going, I don't know who the problem is here. I just got here. So I will look at everybody and go, I need you to stop what you're doing. Everybody sit down and be quiet. If people refuse to be quiet, then I can't know who's making the noise. So as a target parent, or as the people who are kind of on that rejected end of it, when you get advice that seems counter, because you're grasping, you're like, no, if I don't stop, if I don't do these things, I'm going to lose my kid. No, you're going to lose your kid regardless. I need you to stop so I can help you to keep from losing your kid. I need you to start doing things differently. Everything about this dynamic, what we think or feel we should do, is probably the wrong thing. And then we go to counselors or friends. God help you with your friends. And everybody's saying, no, fight harder, do this, do these things. Counselors will say the same thing. Sometimes, yes, but let's fight a different way, because I need to look at the case, and we need to figure out what's going to work here with your child, with what's going on in your dynamic. And that's what we're going to hit on in just a second. So then I'm looking at conflict drivers. So in the normative emotional response to a divorce, everybody looks the same in the beginning. Well, not everybody, but most people are pissed off at something. Why am I here? I'm getting divorced. You're not in the most happy space in your life, right? So all of these behaviors, we all engage in them. Calling names, triangulating, we all do it in this particular space in the beginning. So the job now is to figure out, is this a normative response, or are we dealing with a pathology-driven case, which is where if we had questionnaires or different classes or earlier interventions, and we can identify those cases a little faster, then we can do a little bit more preventative on the front end, which I think it was Robert Garza who said that we should be doing things on the front end, or I know I heard that earlier today. That's really crucial. The earlier we can start putting those stops in place and holding people accountable, that's when you're going to have the most success. So this is where the rubber hits the road, though. This is the part that people kind of overlook. We want to classify everything as fitting into the same category. That's not what I see. That's not what I deal with. So the normative people you see in the green, those are the ones that they can litigate. Give them some help. You'd say, hey, listen, the stuff that you're doing is hurting your child. Don't keep going down that road. Once things start to settle with a little time, they'll be all right. But what we're talking about is dealing with either maladaptive or malignant people or personality disorders. So if you look at these configurations, so the ones in the middle with the green and the orange, if those those interventions that Robert was talking about, very effective right here, because the maladaptive person is usually somebody who's just, I'm just responsive and I'm reactive and I'm not really paying attention to what I'm doing. I don't realize what I'm doing, but if you point it out to them and you work with them a little bit, you can bring them back on board. You can kind of back them up a little bit. That third category, though, with the burgundy people are those people that I go, okay, I don't know what you want me to say, Your Honor, because here's what we're dealing with, okay? In those cases, we're talking about malignant personalities, malignant cases, and everybody thinks that they have a malignant case. I'm going to tell you that's not really the case. That's not true. They are out there, and when you see me crying, shouting, or other, cursing usually, I'm probably dealing with a malignant case, because I have a lot of compassion for the maladaptives. They're just wounded. They don't have they don't have the coping skills. And sometimes when you start implementing the coping skills, they will try to back up and they will try. But if you're dealing with a malignant personality, you need to just, we got to move on to something else, which is where I'm going with this. How do you determine that? So when you're looking at what the cases are, again, remember I said in the beginning, everybody sort of looks the same and you're filing injunctions. Well, I'm going to look at that injunction. Was this a behavior that is situational? Because we're in a high conflict space right now and I don't really like you very much and we're fighting a lot? Or is this habitual? Has it been going on all the time? Is it habitual with everybody? How do people behave? Is it consistent, persistent, and pervasive? Because if it's those three things and they're doing it not just to you, but the lady at the deli counter, we're looking at different cases, different people, different personality types. Here's some other things that we're going to see in those stages. Okay, so how does a lie become the truth? It isn't that hard. I can make something up about anybody in this room and I go about it the right way. Everybody by the end of the day is going to believe that lie I just told. I told it at breakfast. By dinner time, everybody hates you. It's not hard, because you tell a lie in different spaces and you keep the silos. Here's probably one of the biggest, when I'm doing guardian ad litem or social investigation, if I notice that there's a lot of silos in somebody's life, like nobody's connected to anybody else, so I can tell any story I want to everybody around, but they don't actually get the truth, or they don't hear an alternative truth to anything, that's when I'm kind of going to dig a little bit deeper. Because when I go, let's say I get a doctor's report and the doctor's notes say, well, the child's being abused by parent A. Well, okay, doctor, who told you that? Where did you get that information? Well, parent B told me that. Therapist, well, parent B gave me that. So if all roads lead to Rome, you're in Italy. Okay, we got to look for that. So you are then going, okay, this is a case where there's probably not a lot of truth coming on, because everybody's saying the same thing, yes. And a lot of times investigators will just talk to all these people. Well, everybody says the same thing. Yes, but did you ask where they got that? Did they eyewitness any of this? Is this anything that's actually can be proven somewhere else? Is there a store clerk somewhere who can verify that that happened? Are these people vested in your winning? You have to ask the deeper end questions on these things. So like I said, early on, it's really hard to figure out who's who, but as you're going through, as if you're starting to look, if you look deeply into the case, you will start seeing the words not really matching the actions. But one thing you can do to combat this in the beginning, especially if there's injunctions filed and other things going on, is the judiciary can start scheduling status hearings. So I have some judges who I work with in Florida that are getting really good at this, where we'll automatically set up status hearings. So we can come back in and I go, not improving, or, hey, yeah, things are getting better. This is the direction I think we need to go now. And it's a coherent working together, as opposed to everybody kind of doing their own thing and it's more adversarial, then that's not going to work. But if we're scheduling status hearings and we're following the progress, sometimes we can stem that little flow. So here's the other part that most people don't really think about, is the severity of the enmeshment or alignment with the children. So these are all our kids. And I only give up to 3 siblings, because after that, it just becomes a mess. But if you look at those patterns, okay, so if you think of the green again with just a normative child who's sad because their family's breaking up, but then you might have a more enmeshed child or a maladaptive coping or low coping skills. So in the orange, and then going back into that severely alienated or severely enmeshed with the burgundy, look at those different combinations. So when I'm working with a family that has 3 kids and all 3 are different levels of enmeshment, but they're all alienated at that point or not seeing one parent, I will ask the court to let me dig them out one at a time. Let's bring over the green guy. Let's bring over the orange guy. And then we can bring in the red guy. Because if we bring them all at the one time, they're not free. There's still going to be that reporter back to the other parent. There's still going to, sometimes the malignant child or heavily enmeshed child is the one doing most of the work. Okay, they're the ones getting their other siblings kind of, they're either telling them or they're lobbying for whatever the allied parent is wanting. So you've got a lot of dynamics going on in here all at one time, and it's not one size fits all to fix it. You have to really kind of understand where everybody is on the scale. When you move to a more case management system, and this is probably my biggest lobby, is we've got to stop being litigated minded because it doesn't work very well, especially for these types of cases. But if you're in a case management system, then you're utilizing a team effect. It's not, and I'm going to tell you right now, even as a guardian ad litem, I don't like being the only one reporting to the court. I don't like being the sole responsibility person. I want to bounce my stuff. I'm like, I'm seeing this. Are you seeing that? Well, how can we do it? Does anybody have an idea how we can get little Johnny and little Susie in over here onto this and get them more balanced? I don't like being the only one. And that's often where and it comes right down. I've been sitting in court. Well, Miss Mayor, it's up to you. No, thanks. I don't want that. Like, I want some other people in on this with me and some help, because we're going to get more ideas and you're going to get more eyeballs on it. Plus, it works faster. So if you have a case management team, this is sort of what it would look like. And people often say, well, people don't have the money for that. Well, the money that the litigants are spending right now and is astronomical, and it can get really crazy if you have all of these particular professions involved. But as Robert was saying earlier, the money that is going to be saved if we start implementing these early interventions, you could have within the different districts or jurisdictions, a case management group that kind of helps manage the high conflict cases. So if you had somebody like that who was a case manager hired by the court and assigned to the court, it could look a little bit more like this. So where there's a case manager and everybody kind of works with that position, go, hey, crap hit the fan the other day, and we need to get in with the judge, or like all sit down and have a meeting. So it's a more cohesive working unit as opposed to 2 oppositional people trying to prove, I'm going to say right now, trying to prove alienation or prove that somebody is, that's hard. That's hard. This is hard, but easier, because I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm just saying, hey, this is a dysfunctional family and we need to operate in this system a little bit differently. Otherwise, we're going to be 8 years in before we get any kind of resolution. And as the alienated children will tell you, that's not good enough. That's not going to be easy. I touched on this a little bit, so I'm going to go through these slides pretty quickly. Individual therapy, family therapy, and reunification therapy are not the same. An individual therapist cannot bring a child into reunion with the parent. Family dynamic or family therapist is focused on the entire family. So those 2 things operate differently. An individual therapist, even if they bring in somebody else to come into a session, like I've had individual therapists where sometimes I'll bring somebody in, like they're having a problem with their dad. Okay, let's have dad in, let's do some problem solving. But my focus is on the needs of my individual client. So that's why individual therapists cannot fix this situation. It does not work. It's helpful for certain things, but in this particular type of case, it's often backfires and doesn't really take people forward the way they think it is. I would advise, though, that targeted parents get therapists because you're going to need the support. It's very helpful. You need somebody to talk it out, and because you are going through things, and generally I see a complex PTSD in displays, and so that doesn't help you either. So you've got to have somebody kind of give you some coping skills as well. So on that end, yes, individual therapy, helpful, great. Family therapy is different. It focuses on the entire dynamic. Reunification therapy is family therapy with one variation, and that is I'm watching the child. The child is driving my bus. So when the child, let's say we're doing great, we're making progress, and I talk with the favored parent, and the favored parent is like, I'm so excited that little Johnny is going to want to spend the, and I go, okay, yeah, well, we're ready to move up to where they're going to go spend this weekend or this week, or they're going to go do something for extended period of time with that other parent. And then all of a sudden I see regression. I know what's up. I know where that's going because I'm watching the child's behavior to see if we're moving forward, or I'm going to need stronger or more stringent interventions or exclusions of the parent who they're triangulated with. So reunification therapy once a week in an office will not help in a case of moderate to severe alienation. Anybody in this room ever had that work? Anybody? No, not even, I don't care. It doesn't work. So you have to be able to remove all the barriers and obstacles in order to move that forward. And oftentimes that does in a harder case. We're talking about those orange, red cases. It's going to require more stringent things. But if you get in early with those more mild cases, you can do therapy once a week if everybody's kind of following along the rules. One of the things that I do in my practice is I have the parents write letters to the children. And I'm not talking about the standard apology letter that everybody, I'm talking about asking them why other parents are important. What kind of child do you want to be? What kind of child are you trying to raise? What kind of characteristics are you trying to bring out? I want to bring the parents in on a common ground. Who do you want this child to be? How do you want their life to be? And so if you're not focused on those things, and I try to get them all focused on the same thing, the more resistance that I get, or I'll get mouth service. If I get mouth service but no follow-up action, or those letters tell me a lot about what that person really thinks. So you have to use a bunch of different things to help kind of remedy the situation. But if I go to the court and say, okay, this isn't working, and I need them to be taken away for a period of time and have a little bit of a honeymoon period with this other parent, well, we're not going to do that because then we're going to cause trauma. We're going to do these things. So there's, I'm fighting against the people who are telling me to fix it. So it's a really tough thing, but if we can have more case management style where we're all working together, and that can be put into legislation too. So finding ways to implement those steps where we're kind of stop pointing the progression of it as we go. My favorite subject. Now, this is where I get like, oh, Lord, help me. So they're not technically under any kind of court order. I have no control, zero, nada. I would like it to be this would be a great legislation. I think it should be a mandated rule that you cannot get remarried for at least a year, and you have to pass some courses before you do it. Why? Because we often jump from the frying pan into the fire. And the person that you left and the person that you got are the same person, but you don't see it because they're still being nice to you because you haven't pissed them off enough yet. But they have opinions, and they come at me with those opinions, and they want to drive the bus, and they want to be a part of the show. And some of them are great. Like, I'm not saying all step parents are a problem, but because they are so closely affiliated, yet there's no court jurisdiction, they are often they can either be the biggest help or the biggest hindrance in the work that we're doing, trying to get everybody back on board. And there's not a whole lot more I can say about that would not get me into trouble. So I'm just going to leave it there. But step parents need to be integrated somehow. Like if a person has remarried, they shouldn't be allowed to come sit in court. Please, Jesus, don't bring them to court. Like, just everybody stay home. Don't bring them to court. Sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't, but it can be a show after that.
I will have people who need ADA accommodations, they need an ADA advocate.
That's a different thing.
They're a step parent, but then they have to know their place.
I've just had step parents, like I literally had this happen. I got on the stand and kind of blew up everybody. And then we all kind of came back in together and got it somewhat of an agreement. We walked outside, and then the step and the parent got into it right outside the courthouse. Bailiff standing right there. Like, so it's just, there's a time and a place for things, but I'm just going to say that this is a factor that is never really factored in, and it should be. Yes.
Have you have these charts and you've identified parent types, personality types. When you see them, have you ever analyzed what percentage of the parents are this type, what percentage of that type?
Yeah.
And how many are that type?
No. So the question was, have I done any analysis about all of the different types, the personality types? Have I gotten some kind of, I guess, information gathering about any percentage on those types? No, not really. But I can tell you this. Most of my cases that I work on tend to be that maladaptive. Sometimes there's a malignant and a maladaptive. Those are rough. If you get two malignant cases, that's kind of rare to have two malignant people in a relationship. It does happen, but a maladaptive and a malignant case, those are the ones that give me, that's when I start losing my hair, because those, you can't fix those. Those are not fixable cases. Those, you have to manage those kind of cases. But the ones in the middle where it's maladaptive and maladaptive, or a maladaptive and a healthy parent, you can work with them. It's hard, but it can be worked with. But those are mostly what I encounter most of the time. So everyone, when we use that term, well, he's a narcissist or she's a narcissist, and I hear that all the time, like, okay, great, but on what scale? Because we're talking about scales here. We all have narcissistic behaviors. We all have maladaptive behaviors. We all engage in those things. The problem is, where do we fall on the scale? And how far, and is this temporary because I'm in a heightened emotional state? We all do things, but is it consistent, persistent, and pervasive? Is it all situational? Is it habitual? You've got to take all of those things into account. So I would love to do that kind of study, but I'm not a researcher, so I'm going to leave it to people smarter than me who can do statistics. That's not my game. What we do need to do is adding contempt consequences to the orders, and I know that came up earlier. Fines or penalties, I think, are awesome, because I can tell you for a couple cases where that has been implemented, where this one was great, because the dad was the aligned parent, and he was very adamant that this child should never set foot in, and this was a teenager too, by the way, and those are age also. I didn't put this in any slides, but oh Lord, does age make a difference? Because I'm not going to treat an 8-year-old the same way I'm going to treat a 15-year-old. That is not going to work out. So when you implement a fine, though, and this was a small fine, really, but every day that the child wasn't doing time sharing, this parent got fined. Well, lo and behold, magically, the time sharing started automatically. Shoop, that's all it took, right? So there are things that you can do early on, and I think those are a great thing. Those fines and whether there's custodial interference related or however it's done, if it can be implemented by the court, those do work. Requiring classes and counseling psychoeducational to resume the time sharing, with an alienating or aligned parent. So any of those things where there's a consequence, but I can't tell you how many times like they've gone in and got a contempt charge. Well, yes, I find you in contempt, and then nothing happens. So if you're stealing cookies from the cookie jar and somebody says, don't steal any more cookies from the cookie jar, and you take one and nothing happens to you, you're going to go back and get more cookies from the cookie jar. Why wouldn't you? Why? But then what does it teach the children? I don't have to do what I'm told either. I don't have to follow court orders either. I literally sat in a conference room, and I also don't advocate very often for children to come to court. On occasion, it is helpful. There's got to be a good reason for it. For me, though, like, I don't like to let them just come in. In this particular case, malignant parent, maladaptive to healthy other parent, children were coming into the court, and one of the children was very, very narcissistic in the same way that the aligned parent was. The other child, I could tell, was hesitant, but would probably easily go with the targeted parent. They were 20 minutes late for court, which I don't know about y'all, that's just a no, you don't do that. So when they were sitting out in the hallway, the bailiff was supposed to bring them in, but the judge got up and walked to the door anyway. This was more of a conference room than a courtroom. And we can hear them talking. And I said to that parent, the malignant parent's attorney, I said, have you ever met the children? And he said, no. And I said, well, take a breath. This is going to be cute. So he's already panicked because his client was 20 minutes late, and he already got a bit of a butt chewing from the judge for that and some other things. So then I hear the judge, not the bailiff, not anyone else, but I hear the judge say, because I said so. So the defiance wasn't just to the parents. They just told a judge, I'm not doing what I think you want me to do. Did eventually come in, and that day one child left with the targeted parent and the other child went back home, because I knew that the aligned child would be more harmful to what I'm trying to do with the other parent or the other child. So this is why I'm saying you have to know what you're dealing with in all of these cases, because you can't treat them all the same. There is no one size fits all treatment for that.
So what was the age difference with those two?
She's asking what the age difference is 2 years. So it was 14 and 12.
So my thought, when the question was, in that situation where one goes with the aligned parent and one goes with the targeted parent, do those children still ever have joint visits with either of those parents?
This is still in the early throes of this particular case, but yes. So the question was, do they have joint visits with the other sibling? In this case, the sibling is just as abusive as the parent to this other child. So it's one of the factors that why I asked for this separation on that particular one. So the other thing that I think would be really helpful in the legislation is to not allowing the children to be monetized. The monetization of custody and children is really a problem. And I have a case right now where we've gone to 50-50, everything's kind of gotten back, and they're still arguing about child support. And I'm like, oh my God, guys, but we're getting somewhere with that. But the whole, having a monetary advantage, if it becomes necessary, finding other solutions. What I have up here are just suggestions. They're not like, what should that look like? Because again, these cases are the same in regard to pattern of behavior and what you see, but the solutions often have to be different because the circumstances aren't always the same. And I'm always thinking too about like, what judge is this? What attorneys am I dealing with? Because I will tell you about the trifecta from hell is when you have a malignant or even severely maladaptive client who teams up with an attorney who may or may not have their own personality issues. And then you get a judge who either doesn't care, is a baby judge, inexperienced, doesn't understand. That for me is like, okay, I don't even know where to go. Like, we just need to start over. So I know I just answered the question by not answering the question, Allison, but there is
No.
there's no real specific answer that you can give on that.
Can I just make a suggestion? Because we're going to be focused on, writing legislation tomorrow. What you put together with, just showing like the peoples and the color and healthy, with the, a green or a yellow parent with a red parent, or, those variations, it probably would be helpful to kind of, even if it wasn't legislation, more from the case management standpoint, really spelling out what could the solution be, and also with the age related, because I agree with you, age is so important, and also gender, because if boys in particular, I read Lundy Bancroft's book, because he said if the father's abusive and the child believes that the mother is at fault, there's a good chance the son in particular will become abusive. And I see my son mimicking that behavior, and I see it playing out, and I'm trying to show the positive role modeling as best as possible. And I agree, it's coping skills. I want my son to have, like, whether it's DBT or something, and it's not being, pushed through. And I've learned that you have to be like a trauma-informed parent to, raise your child to help them as best as possible. So I just feel like it would be really helpful to spell out each of those scenarios. What could the possible solution be? And I love the fact that you're saying case management, because I did collaborative divorce initially, and it was so helpful to see a non-adversarial approach to surrounding my child. And then my ex threw it out because he was not happy with the outcome, and then hit the ground running with court. And we've done mediation throughout the whole process, because I was like, I don't want to escalate. I listened to Bill Eddy when he spoke last year at Elaine Cobb's event, and he talked about you want to take the temperature down as much as possible. So that's the approach I've tried to take, as much as possible, for the best interest of my son, so he'd be less caught up in this. So I like that approach with case management. It makes so much sense.
It does make sense. I've got a lot of questions coming around the
Sure,
room,
thank
but what do you want to do? We're so off schedule today.
Thank you.